Hello, it's another Tuesday. Welcome to Tuesday Live. I am Omini Oden. The first Africa Summit, Russia-Africa Summit, have come and gone, but not without gains that will advance the continent and strengthen diplomatic relations. This is driven by Russia's quest of restoring partnership with the African continent since the fall of the Soviet Union. Going by reports, Russia has written off $20 billion of African countries' debt that had accumulated during the Soviet era, for which Ethiopia is the latest beneficiary. Analysts say Nigeria recorded major gains at the summit in deals that cut across the sectors of security, education, mines and steel, development, oil and gas, trade and investment, as well as agriculture. Specifically, the summit presented some ray of hope for the resuscitation of the moribund Ajaokuta Steel Company, which has gulped well over $5 billion in 4 decades with nothing to show for. There are other gains, especially with Memorandum of Understanding between the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) and Russia's Lukoil company to revamp Nigeria's ailing refineries. Tonight on NTA Tuesday Live, the fallout of the Russia-Africa Summit is the focus as we look at the gains for Nigeria after this background report put together by Olayinka Ojo.
The Africa-Russia Summit, described as a starting point for building fair partnership between Russia and the African continent, was the first of its kind. It was an opportunity for the African continent to share mutually beneficial ideas with Russia. Looking back, the Nigerian delegation sees the summit as a success story.
It covered a broad range of areas, and what's most impressive to me is that the Russians have also agreed that for many of these things it would be a government-to-government partnership.
The summit is seen as an avenue to further strengthen the robust bond of bilateral ties as Nigeria and Russia agree to expand cooperation in some key sectors of the economy. It gave a ray of hope that a government-to-government understanding will see the completion of the legendary Ajaokuta steel rolling mill.
We have a firm promise, especially from the president of the Russian Federation, that Russia is willing to come in, and of course Ajaokuta will work before Mr. President completes this second term.
You know, steel is a bedrock of industrial development, and once we are able to bring back Ajaokuta on stream, I think Nigeria will spring up and the sky will be the limit.
Not just that, a memorandum of understanding was also signed by the NNPC and Russia's Lukoil.
It's been a particularly rewarding visit for the petroleum sector. I have always said that Russia has a lot of know-how and technology that Nigeria can benefit from. We have the natural resources that Russia can benefit from.
On education, Russia assured that more scholarships will be given to Nigerians. On combating insurgency, another priority security issue at the summit, President Muhammadu Buhari also got a deal for technology, upgrade, and timely delivery of some attacking helicopters. For many, the summit is believed to open a new chapter in Nigeria-Russia relations towards growth and development.
Fallout of Russia-Africa Summit gains for Nigeria is the focus of Tuesday Live tonight. The program is an audience participatory program, and at some point our lines will be open and the phone number will be displayed on the screen. When we get across to you, go straight to the point, make your inputs, raise your concerns, and we'll address them. And in doing this, turn down the volume of your television set. Also tonight, we'll be on Twitter. At the appropriate time, we'll display the Twitter handle for you to join, and as much as time will allow, we'll take the tweets and our team of guests will address the issues. Tonight I have a team of gentlemen. From my immediate right, former Permanent Secretary, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Good to have you on Tuesday Live tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Ambassador Clement Onoja Aduku, former Nigeria envoy to Russia, former Chief of Protocol and later spokesperson, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Good to have you tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Ken Ife, macroeconomic policy analyst. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And joining us all the way from from Russia is via Skype is Nigeria's ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary to the Russian Federation with concurrent accreditation to the Republic of Belarus. Hello, Your Excellency. Good to have you join us on Tuesday Live tonight.
Yes, it's nice to be here.
Okay. Staying on you, after the visit or shortly before the visit, there were a lot of analysis in Nigeria, concerns were raised, and you being on ground, will ask you, after the whole turnout, what are your comments?
I was particularly elated that Mr. President and his delegation visited Russia for the first time. We had been hoping for his visit, which would help cement the efforts that we have been making since I assumed my responsibilities here at the mission in 2017. His visit is historic and is a culmination of all the efforts that we have made in trying to raise awareness and get Russia to re-engage with Africa, more specifically with Nigeria. So I was very, very happy that the president was able to make it to this historic summit.
So anybody will be asking, after the visit, what gains regarding Nigeria-Russian ties?
Well, the gains, as far as I am concerned, in your lead to this story, is that we had so many agreements, so many MOUs signed with the Russian Federation, that to me the greatest gain is trying to reestablish our own relationship with Russia in terms of increasing awareness and in highlighting the importance of Russia to us and vice versa. We are also important to Russia. So is Russia to us. But the problem is that we did not have as much information about Russia, neither did Russia have as much information about us to engage us in a meaningful way. But with this summit and with a strong delegation from Nigeria, over 200 Nigerians were in Sochi. It was a remarkable thing. And Russians have now started gaining confidence in dealing with Nigeria. And I think Nigerians have also now been exposed to Russia to engage Russians in a much more meaningful way. And I think that one of the most important things is for us to be engaged in what my foreign minister called economic diplomacy. And economic diplomacy is what we started. So I'm very happy.
Okay, we'll get back to you, Ambassador Davis Ugba. Back here in Abuja, let me go to Ambassador Joe Keshi. There were a lot of concerns raised, and the visit has come and gone. If you go to permutations in back forth, what does Russia want in Nigeria? How will Russia gain? What are your own comments?
You know, in both your introduction and your reporter, you use the word, you made the sentence that you hope this is a new chapter in Nigeria-Russia relationship. We've had some very good relationship with Russia in the past when it was part of the Soviet Union. I know many people in this country will recall that initially in the 60s, there was suspicion about the Russians, obviously because of ideological differences. You know, we've just emerged from independence. And I remember I read somewhere, and it's true, that anytime Mrs. Ransom Kuti, who was one of the early friends of Russia, talked to the Prime Minister about recognizing Russia, I think the Prime Minister used to say something like, the enemy we don't know is better than the friend we know, or something along that line, you know. But subsequently, during the Civil War, when our traditional friends failed us, we had to, and we were looking for arms and ammunition to fight the Civil War. The Russians came to our rescue. We have virtually bought all the weapons we needed at that time to persecute the war. And after the war, relationship expanded, and one of the outcome was the decision to build the Ajakuta, state complex, and that was conceptualized, presented as the hope of the base, the bedrock of the foundation of our industrialization, in this country. But it has turned out to be, a dream that did not materialize, because it's there, they built, or it's half completed, or whatever. But somehow along the line, we missed it. But at the same time, when the Soviet Union, broke up, Russia itself went through a very challenging period. But today, it has re-emerged in its own right. It has become very assertive. It has strengthened all the parameters that it now sees itself confident enough to become a player again globally. And in recent times, unfortunately, I would say, Africa has become the playground of the powerful nations. And so Russia now feels that it is strong enough, it is confident enough, like the Chinese have done, the Japanese have done, the Canadians have done, the Americans have done. It's confident enough to summon 52 African leaders, to Sochi for this conference. Having given you this background, a number of agreements were reached, no doubt about that. This is normal in visits like this. But we must not lose the fact that these agreements are just agreements, MOU. It's just an expression of intent that this is what we're going to do. If you go by the Ajakuta experience, except we in this country turn a new leaf, a few years from now, we'll probably be back here discussing the death of a dream that came out of this summit, in Sochi. So it's good. Agreements have been signed. MOUs are all over the place. In fact, I've said this on one of your programs, that the archives in this country, the government archives, is a graveyard of MOUs that have not been implemented. It's a graveyard of reports that have not been implemented. You can imagine if all of them have been implemented, I don't think we'll be going around the world attending these conferences. In fact, we will be bringing people here because with an enabling environment, investors like to see such an environment, and that's where they will put their money. The Russians themselves will put their money here without we signing any MOU. So it's good, we signed this, they're all intents, but it is now left to us to ensure that all these agreements are faithfully implemented. And when we do that, that's when we reap the benefit of this summit.
Okay, let me go to Ambassador Aduku. A lot said, like Jokeshi said, that this is one way that Africa, there's under way do some kind of a scramble for Africa. From your own experience, do you agree with that?
Thank you so much. I agree totally with His Excellency Ambassador Keshi. Because it is not just enough to go around the world signing agreements, protocols, memoranda of understanding, and so on. It takes also the political will to ensure that such agreements are fully and effectively implemented. I happen to have been fortunate in 2000 and towards the end of 2009, 2010, to be asked to go with Ambassador G.B. Prewari to the National Planning Commission to set up the Joint Commission. I was there for 1 year with Ambassador Prewari. We found out that of all the gamut of MOU protocols, agreements signed with Nigeria and several countries, only 32 were active out of the whole lot. We sieved, and by the time we submitted our final report, we found only 32 out of how many hundreds were only active. That is to say that we have to express, or rather show, some cautious optimism as we enter into all these agreements, because every side has own interest in signing and entering into this agreement. Like His Excellency said, these are just expression of interest. It is not yet concretized until we bring all of them effectively together and ensure that they work. And the only way to make such agreements work properly is to ensure that all hands are on the deck. It's not just enough to put pen and paper together, but to be sure that it is done and done properly. Putting above every other thing our national interest, to be sure that at the end of it all we have a win-win situation. It's not just, yes, there is a scramble now. Most countries of the world, especially the advanced economies, are turning to Nigeria because they can see the huge and enormous potentials that are on display. So everybody wants to take advantage, but we not just sit down and watch them come and take away everything as they did during the partition and scramble and partition for Africa.
So how will it be a win-win when some people feel that it is more like Nigeria bending more to Russia than Russia bending to us? How would that be a win-win?
Yeah, I think it is the other way around. I see that if you look at, or rather watch the concluding statement His Excellency President Vladimirovich Putin made at the end of the bilateral session at the emergence of the Africa-Russia summit, you find that he says something, and I quote him. He simply said, "I really hope that your visit to Russia will give a new impetus to our relations in all dimensions," end of quote, meaning that the Russians are now determined. When I was Director of Trade and Investment in Russia for nearly 4 years, each time I went talking to Russians in Siberia, in St. Petersburg, Moscow City, and some other major cities, they always complain that, well, Nigeria has been so pro-West, we do not want to go there to compete because we have already seen that all these years we have been looking more towards European Union and America. But I try to tell them, no, that the best time to come to Africa to invest is now, because perhaps more than ever before, Nigeria is now very, very economically formidable, diplomatically sophisticated, and ideologically flexible to align to any party or any country that wants to work with us. So, in sum, it is not just that the Russians will come and put in all the money they have. Yes, they have the money, we have the resources. And they cannot develop most of the things they do not have, just like you see French is doing in most of the Francophone countries. And then the French are also in some other areas in the African continent, trying to, get what they can. It is no longer the time for scrambling for territories. It's now trying to see what they can get from our economic and natural resource endowment, which is huge. You can see what is happening in the DRC. The Belgians, the Americans, and all sorts of people come in there to see what they can grab. But then the people are not able to get their acts together because they are fighting, the tribes are fighting each other here and there. And then it is a win-lose situation for them. They are losing, the Westerners or the other foreign direct investors are gaining. But in our own case, it will not be like that, because now we have a president that is focused, president that is determined, and president that wants to ensure that any time we get into any agreement with any country, we do not lose out in the process.
Okay. Now, before we go to specifics, Professor Kenife, let me give you this brief. Russia has, through reforms, successfully privatized a number of state-owned entities, which has now become global household names. This is especially so in energy, manufacturing, defense, and the metallurgical sectors. Now, from what Ambassador Duku said, that as much as a number of critics or conversations are tilted towards, like, Nigeria is more dependent in all this, but to end up a win-win. How can we achieve this in the long run?
I think we can. Let me congratulate
Without necessarily going into specifics.
Yeah, let me just congratulate the government for that bold initiative, and it's a comprehensive package that taps the strength of Russia. And I have to tell you that Russia has proved over the last few years a reliable, predictable, robust partner. And when I mean robust, it means you can actually trust their word. And I don't see projects where they give grants or development support, that they have governance conditions on those. Anyway, the biggest winner is energy, and that is their strength. Energy in the sense that we now can see light in the end of the tunnel, the likelihood that a power plant, nuclear power plant, may be built to put an end to the agony of years of 4,000 megawatts and what have you. And then we'll see the energy in gas. They actually lead in gas because most of Europe is supplied by gas. It's from Russia, obviously coming from their Siberia. And if they turn off the tap, there will be chaos across the whole of Europe. So they have the experience, and they have the experience of deep sea oil gas prospecting. So they will do well with Gazprom, and NNPC will do well because we are very weak on the deep sea, and we know our equation now. We are doing, there's less investment on the of onshore than there. Then also, of course, the NNPC thing with the Lukoil with the refinery would also be big time for us, because we've got our oil firms, our refineries, government-owned, that are moribund. They're just not producing, they're not even exploiting the 5,000 barrels given to us, allocated by OPEC for our domestic production. So, and what fascinates me is the fact that it is government to government, which is a peculiar way our president wants to pursue this, and actually seem more appropriate working with Russia, because we now know that if we are going to have traction, then let's start with the government. For example, the failure of the steel, if the government rolls in and wants to deliver it, we will know that we will get it.
That's the point I'm making now. With all this, if the mechanism is not in place for all this to sink and sit properly, will we go the way of Russia?
Oh, no,
if all these gains have arrived.
You see, I'm an apostle of privatization, privatize everything, did in the PPP everywhere. But there are success stories in some constituencies where you have public sector utility working. For example, in South Africa, their energy public utility works. So in Russia, it works for them. So there may be something that we can benefit from, particularly the areas that they are looking at now. I've just enumerated some of those. Let's give it a try. I'm not knocking the private sector at all, I'm not. But I think we should try that bit, and as a stepping, at least if it enables us to recover the chaos of the yesteryears of iron and steel project that hasn't worked. But we'll see. Although there may still be an issue, I don't know, down the drain, because Ukraine was the one that we actually did this project with. And of course, you know the situation between Ukraine and Russia at the moment. So we don't know. The devil is in the detail, but we don't know how that's going to play out.
Okay. Before we go to Russia, let me take on Ambassador Keshi. Now, with all this now, how soon are we expecting maybe a reciprocal visit from Russia to Nigeria, say an economic mission, to come and see for themselves what they are coming to fall on?
Before I answer your question, let me wade into what the professor said. All what we've done with Russia in the past has always been government to government. The Jakarta steel plant was not government and private. No, it was government to government. Most of the thing we've done, government to government. Secondly, the issue of nuclear power, it's a far more complicated and complex. You don't just wake up one morning and say you are going to build a power plant. No, you can't. I mean, a nuclear energy, you can't. There's a committee of 20 of the most powerful countries in the world who, number one, would have to give you the license or the permission to do your power project. And the rules are very stringent and they are very diligent. And so for a nation that has a poor maintenance culture, they just might, I'm not saying they would not, but I'll be surprised if we do not improve on that before we are granted that license. But having said that, with regard to your question,
everybody's eager.
The last time the Russian president was in this country was 10 years ago. In 2009.
Just before 2009 November.
And I was the permanent secretary of the ministry then, so I know a lot of what happened It was not Putin. It was his.
Medvedev.
Yes,
Dmitry Medvedev.
Yes, you know, and so on. And you know, you asked a very, because it brought back memories of that visit and the Russian mind. I mean, and the way Russia saw us then, which is why I like the word you guys used here, that we hope this is a new phase, a new start, because he was traveling, he was doing an African tour, and in almost some of the small countries he visited, he spent a whole full day or 2 days, and he said he was going to overfly Nigeria, just make a stopover and leave. And we refused, we rejected that. And we made it clear to him that except he spends a night here, he could as well just fly past and, you know. I remember the the ambassador pleading in my office, and I said, this is our position. You guys either respect us and give us our due, or you just fly past. We have no business if you want to visit, you know. Somehow they changed their mind and they stayed. They came in midday. We had a good dinner, we had you know. So when you look at it, it's been 10 years. I'm not saying there's been I don't know of any Russian visit, you should know better, you know, since then. But the most important thing is that this is actually not dependent on the Russians. Okay. It is, look, we are the ones who are in need of most of these things the agreements that we signed. It is we who now have to put up a timetable to say, look, we are ready, like Ajokuta, will you guys come and do if it's inspired. I don't know exactly what agreement was signed, but if I have to wade into the Ajokuta thing, my position would be, look, send your experts to come and look at Ajokuta. This is something that started in the 70s. And if I'm right, the technologies may have changed over the years.
Completely. Totally.
Completely. So we might just have, as well just probably start with a new set of technology or just some part of it. So send your people, let them see what...
do an assessment.
Do an assessment of the place and see if it's all obsolete and we need to replace. Let's begin to replace and see how we can get the complex working again. So it's we who have to set the timetable for them to come in. It's not for us to go and come back and rejoice that we have signed an agreement with the Russians and nobody does anything. And since I've been having this conversation, I've been focusing on the fact that except we take serious the issue of making these agreements work, I make the point that we'll be back years again from now discussing that everything, that the hope, that the enthusiasm that was raised by the visit, again, just died like most dreams in this country. So we have to put up a timetable, every sector, and that has been the weakness. We go on a trip, we come back, and in fact, in some cases, these days, or you know, even before I left the service, officers no longer write reports that somebody has to take on and follow. So I hope there'll be a comprehensive report that will be spread around the various sectors that the Russians are interested in, and every Department of State will now begin to implement it and say, look, either we go or we invite them so that they can take a look at this thing. And then when we talk about the refinery, I'm a little bit concerned because, you see, the refinery was built by the Japanese. I don't know whether their own technology and the Japanese are the same, although we've had so many, what's that word the people in NNPC like to use?
Joint venture.
No, not joint venture. Maintenance, something.
Turnaround maintenance.
Turnaround maintenance. I don't know how many times we've done turnaround, so I don't even know what technology they have in those places. But again, these are things that NNPC could write to the Russians, again, visit and see what it is. If they begin to act fast, certainly the gains will begin to pour in due course. But again, if everybody stays down and decide that it's a visit to somewhere else, we'll be back to square one.
Okay. Ambassador Uba, if we begin to act fast and we don't allow everything lie low, then the speed will be sustained. How ready are we, the Nigerian community over there, and how soon are we having a team from that end come to Nigeria to see things for themselves?
Well, thank you very much. And I listened very carefully to all my distinguished colleagues' contribution to this discussion. And everything they've said is right on the money, particularly when Jokeshi talked about implementation. I think that's the key to all the MOUs and agreements that have been signed. What I believe was lacking, particularly from our own end, was the will to implement all the numerous agreements that were signed as contained in a fantastic document that Ambassador Aduku referred to, that outlined was so many agreements. And when I review that document, we discovered that perhaps not even 5% of those provisions have been worked on. And I start to wonder what happened within that time that that protocol was put in place and when I arrived on the scene. So it's not just for us here in Moscow, it is also us in Nigeria to be very serious about implementing these agreements. The president has done his own bit by coming here and extracting some commitments from the Russians. It is up to us at home to take these agreements seriously. And when I listen to the ministers and I listen to Governor Payani also speak regarding the outcome of this particular summit, I am confident that this time around, we are going to sit down and actually work very actively on implementing the provisions or the MOUs that were signed during this summit. Ajaokuta has been lagging for the past 40 years. ALSCON has been lagging for the past 14 years. The nuclear power plants have been lagging. They've been on the drawing board for the past 20-something years. We've trained nuclear scientists to man the nuclear power plants that we hoped will be built in Nigeria. The Russians have trained us technicians. The Russians have trained our scientists. We have an atomic research laboratory in Zaria, all geared towards the nuclear power plant program that we are now discussing. Everything is still on the drawing board. It is time for us to take concrete actions to implement the things that we're signing. We in Moscow are going to be working with the Russians and pushing them to constitute teams that will visit Nigeria in the shortest amount of time, so we can get their own counterparts in Nigeria also to sit down and craft a path on implementation. We've done the work of talking. We've done the work of crafting MOUs. At least in principle, we've agreed we need to engage in these projects together. As Putin also put it, we can do this together. President Buhari said we need to do this together. We're not asking for grants. Nigeria is rich enough to devote resources. That is why the government-to-government approach is critical. Because once the government of the Russian Federation says we are interested in doing this, they will bring to bear the might of the federal government of Russia on these projects. And they're not joking. If the Russians don't want to do it, they'll tell you we don't want to do it. But for them to say, yes, we are interested, we want to do it, we should take them seriously and also prepare at home to implement the provisions of these agreements or these MOUs. So it's up to us. We need to solve our problems. We have an energy deficit. We have infrastructural deficits that we need to bridge. And it's not for the Russians to come and force their way into Nigeria. It is for us to attract Russians to come because we know they have comparative advantages in several fields. And that is what we're tapping into. So we're going to do our own part in Moscow. We are going to engage them and push them to constitute teams to come to Nigeria. But in Nigeria, Nigeria also has to be ready to constitute teams on each of these projects. It is not just one team, several teams specifically targeting each of these projects to match what the Russians will bring. And we'll try to get them to Nigeria as soon as possible, because we don't have time to waste. We've wasted enough time. 40 years to implement a Jakarta is not a joke. So 14 years, in court to implement ASCON is not a joke. On the drawing board, over 20 years for nuclear power plant, that is not something to joke with, you see. So we are ready here to work, and we hope that our counterparts in Nigeria are also ready to work. But I agree with everything that my distinguished colleagues, ambassadors, have said on this matter.
Besides the fact that the mission is ready to work, we saw a lot of excitement on the faces of Nigerians when Mr. President had a session with them. How ready are they, and how available is the mission for them to key in and synergize with what is the development? The Nigerian community.
You see, Russia has trained a lot of Nigerians. Some of them are still here, and some of them want to see a breakthrough in terms of re-engagement with Russia. And they were very excited when the president came, and you saw it in their voices, you saw it in their faces. Okay, this is an opening that we must utilize. This is an opening that we must take advantage of. And we are ready here to mobilize the Nigerian community in every way, shape, or form to assist in implementing some of these provisions in Nigeria, or some of these MOUs. So many MOUs are flying all over the place. I have a stack of agreements on my desk that have not been enforced. Most of them have been out of force, that we need to get our folks at home to now review and ratify these MOUs or these agreements that have been lacking. But I can tell you that the Nigerian community in Russia is ready to partner with us at the embassy to implement programs at home. But it takes the support of home to make it happen. And they need to strengthen, home needs to strengthen our mission here so we can do more, and we are prepared to do more.
Okay, now let me go to Aduku. Well, you can join the conversation, and tonight we are looking at fallout of Russia-Africa Summit gains for Nigeria. Our Twitter handle is @Tuesday Live NTA. Now to Aduku, government-to-government approach. Does this mean the private sector is out?
It does not in any way totally exclude the active participation of the private sector. According to the President Muhammad Buhari's presentation to Russian President Vladimir Putin, he said, if I might still paraphrase it a little, it's going to be partnership on government-to-government basis at a lower cost. If you look at the details of the intention expressed during the meeting. What am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that the private sector still has a very vital role to play, because the PPP thing, like Professor said, has always been there. Government cannot go it alone. You can see how entirely government-owned enterprises and projects have failed over the years. And the private sector, when they come actively to support the government, it is then we shall get the much more desired result. But then let me just quickly add one thing, that the issue of keying into the global agenda these days is not just using the old digital technology. You can see that this evening, His Excellency President Muhammad Buhari left for Saudi Arabia to participate in an economic forum tagged Future Investment Initiative.
Sure.
Yes, so the Future Investment Initiative, what is it all about? It's all about digital economy. Thank God recently, our Federal Ministry of Communication was renamed to be Federal Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy. And what is this digital economy all about? Well, it includes artificial intelligence, innovation, robotics, mass surveillance, and huge investment into new forms of sciences and technology. The world today is a technology-driven world. And if the Russians come into Nigeria to implement alongside our focal MDAs on these sectors identified, and they find that we're still operating in the old analog technology. I mean, we'll lose out. So Nigeria must invest heavily in this new digital economy that is taking the world to a new stage. Otherwise, we would just be watching and looking them take away everything we have. We wouldn't even know. I remember some times ago when we were in the university, we used to be told that the Ajip, the Italian company that was shipping our oil and loading all the containers, did not even allow Nigerians to go to the high sea there where these things were done. They would take several millions of barrels and they would tell us they have only taken 2-3 millions of barrels. How do we know when we are not actively participating there? So I am saying in essence that until we are able to key into this new digital economy, work with it, be concerned and train hands, the manpower, all these agreements will just be going over our head and we'll not even know what is happening until at the end of it all, we lose out. And I'm sure Nigerians are very, very prepared to work hard this time around. Because it just takes a walk to any of these Area 10 and all these computer villages in Lagos, Port Harcourt, Calabar and other places. You find out what Nigerians are able to do. I ask myself, who trained them to get all these things done? Then if on their own they can get this is done, especially the young people, imagine when government gives massive support to key us effectively and actively into this new world, new vision into the world economy. It means we can go places and we do better.
Our Twitter handle again is at Tuesday Live NTA. You can join the conversation. We have a couple of tweets already, and let me take the first one to Professor Ken Ife. This tweet is coming from Yaokos. He says, we have a lot to gain with our untapped resources. It will also negate the monopoly of our rail system investment by the Chinese companies. The mining, oil and security are also welcome ideas.
That's very interesting. I really like that tweet. And it points to, this tweet speaks to the compelling reason why Russia will do business with Nigeria this time round. The times have changed. In 2009, we weren't recognized as the biggest economy in Africa. It was just after that we rebased our economy, and it became clear that Nigeria is the biggest economy in Africa. Now, just of late, even as at AFCTA is being signed, with a 1 billion population and with a projected revenue already is about 3.6 trillion, going to be 29 trillion in 2050. Now, and is 52 countries going to 54 countries. That's the biggest regional body. And that's why everybody's running to Africa. That's why you have Chinese putting 60 billion, and apart from the 60 billion, they're also doing the road and silk initiatives. America gave us unconditional AGOA, bringing 6,500 items, duty-free, quota-free. The first 15 years went, we didn't do much. They extended for another 15 years. So they're opening the doors. Canada, as you mentioned. India is putting credit lines in with our banks to make sure that they promote the trade. Japan, in the last TICAD, is committing over 30 billion, and the story goes on. So Russia has put 20 billion down, but they want to do more. So the circumstance of this, and also on geopolitical influence, global geopolitical influence, it connects with Nigeria, because when Nigeria wants them to support us in having a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council, then we find Nigeria a partner in their geopolitical influence. So there are everything. You go to solid minerals, yes, if they're going to do some of our solid minerals, they do need some of our solid minerals for their defense industry, because we have over 44 mineable, commercially viable minerals here, and many of them are in the category for defense industry. So there will be a market for some of those minerals, as well as, of course, our enrichment and our nuclear plant will benefit from some of those. In the oil, they may not need our oil because they are also a very big oil producer. But in gas, they may not need our gas, but they might actually support the continental gas pipeline that will go from Nigeria through Algeria. I don't know whether Morocco wants it now or no longer. I don't know. But going from there to Europe, Europe would prefer to have here to balance their risk against Russia. Because what they're having from Siberia, if they turn it off,
there will be crisis in Europe. But then if they have a backup coming from here through, then there will be, you know what I mean, they share the risk.
Sure.
So wherever you look at it, obviously for years they've been giving us a lot of scholarships. You know, I know many people who benefited from Russian scholarships. You need that to consolidate the relationship. You know, you've got to have to build. Why is China deepening their trade with America by having 6.5 million Chinese in American universities? It's all part of it. So we're not leaving that behind. So I think it will work this time round because the reasons are very compelling. The economic circumstances right now are threatening to all parties. And Nigeria stands to gain in each and every item that they carefully selected that we are targeting. Sorry?
We don't have the understanding.
Sorry, say that again?
In all this, what if the understanding is not there?
They wouldn't have gone so far if there was no understanding. And the man didn't even say, I don't want this, I don't want that, because it was music to his ear. And what I'm saying is that we have carefully selected their strength. Okay, take military hardware. How can you take our minerals to support your defense industry and you will not sell military hardware to us? They will sell you military hardware, and they are actually very superior now. Their armaments are most superior right now. Just go and check. They now have the most sophisticated arsenal right now. So if they say they're going to give... Why? Okay, look at the relationship with Egypt. The closest tie they have in Africa is with Egypt. With over 40% of it, and Egypt is not complaining. They're doing very well. So I think we should give it a chance.
Okay. Professor Keshi, Alas Kadigo says the visit of Mr. President is a welcome development, more especially we in the Northeast. For Russia to help us fight insurgents and revamping the Lake Chad Basin.
No, I'm not sure the Russians will help you fight. So I'm not trying to dampen enthusiasm. You have your own military. But I think that the Russians would probably supply you some of the right armament to start with. But you know, it's one thing to supply the right armament. It's also want you to have the capacity and the capability, you know, to utilize these things very well. In fact, a couple of years ago, as I said, it was a Russian mix. That's why for a long time this country had the Russian mix as the core of our efforts. And not too long ago, I knew we went to the Americans to buy some planes and so on. And I've always wondered why we went for planes when what we really needed was attack helicopters, which is what you can actually use for the kind of fight going on in the Northeast. The second thing, of course, is that, you know, I'm always a little bit cautious when I say this, because we seem to, in this country these days, and that speaks to the text message, I mean to the tweet, we seem to behave as if we are completely helpless. Everybody must come to help us. Every time the president goes out and signs this agreement, we start jumping up and down like, you know, people who do not know what to do or have no clue what to do until this helps. No, for goodness sake, no. This is a country well endowed in everything you can imagine. It's just that over the years we've just lost focus in a way and manner that we lost some of the things that would have today made us a very great nation. You know, I can go back and talk a lot about the military exploit, for example, in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And when I hear people say, the military in particular, when I hear some of the military officers say that, oh, the situation in Northeast is a different kind of ball game, I say that's a lie, complete lie. Who did they fight in Liberia and Sierra Leone? They didn't fight a conventional warfare. They fought ragtag armies, and they excelled. So what happened with the experience of the military? So even if you come in with hundreds of attack helicopters and you do not have the men with the capability, the capacity to really execute this war. You know, to be candid, sometimes when you sit down and reflect on this properly, you begin to say to yourself, how come that we are fighting a ragtag army with an army that's so resourced, no matter whatever they say their budget is, and for over 10 or many years now, we can't deal with the situation in the northeast. So it's one thing for the Russians who promise to send us aircraft or attack helicopters, but look at it this way. We've had assistance from the British, we had assistance from the Americans, we are now having assistance from the Russians. Who else is going to come to our assistance before we get up and really take this whole issue very seriously? So it's one thing for countries to say they want to help us. Again,
when we did expectations for the new economic team, advisory team, the concerns were raised like this, and I believe maybe...
But they raised the same concerns?
No, I think what they will do...
Look, the thing
with
is...
this opening, now we believe that they will give a guide.
No, the economic team is a different thing. But you see, look, every department of state must live up to its own mandate.
Yes.
The role of the military is to defend the territorial integrity, sovereignty of this country. Not to be doing police work that they want to start doing now. That's not their responsibility. That's for the police. And we now have so many paramilitary agencies to do that. Let them focus on defending the territorial integrity of this country. And that goes to the fact that, look, I don't know, when you look at this whole situation very well, you say to yourself, the people who had the military today were lieutenants when they fought in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And the same complaint they had is the same complaint they say have today. So you now say to yourself, what has happened over 20 years? The war in Sierra Leone and Liberia ended about 1999. It was for 10 years. So for 10 years we fought a war. Thereafter, what did we do with the military? Did we develop our military to make it even stronger? Every military that goes to war comes out stronger.
So how will this tweet suffice?
This is the point.
Because the request.
Again, it requires for us, we've actually been saying the same thing. It requires for us to develop the capacity and the ability to do some of these things. What my colleague here said, and he said, look, without the skill, without the knowledge, without the capacity, we are going nowhere. If they bring us technology and we do not have people that can utilize it, so again, when you expand this discussion, we must also begin to focus on education. We must also begin to focus on science and technology. Because this is exactly what, look, the Russians are not going to, as he rightly pointed out, they're not going to bring anything, analog. They're just going to bring modern technology. But we must be ready to absorb, imbibe, and utilize this. And we cannot do this if we do not change our mindset, if we do not change our own culture of behavior, if we do not have the political will to say that, look, enough is enough, we really need to get this country going. And the sooner the better, because everybody talks of the growing youth population that is unemployed. And I've said this many times. I get frightened and worried that there might be a category of youths in this country that might never work. Where's the industry?
Okay. Before I go to Russia, let me raise this. Let's go to the real. What more can we know about the proposed 1,400 kilometers Lagos-Calabar rail deal with
Okay.
the Metro of...
I know that contract was being negotiated with Chinese company or something. I think it was, I'm not sure where we are on that, because I think
it was with the Chinese company.
Yeah, that's correct. But and I know that financing is at the core of whatever is going on there, and that raises the whole issue about financing of all of these projects. How are they going to be financed? I'm not sure how we're going to finance all that because of the debt situation. But what gives me comfort is we are credit worthy. Because if they are going to come into our oil fields, we might actually pay with some crude oil at some point, or some refined products at some point. We might pay with some gas at some point. We might pay with some solid minerals at some point. So we may not have to look for cash or look for foreign exchange. So that's where it's helpful.
Are you not looking at the compatibility?
No. Remember when Babangida was there, we came to the crunches, and he has to say these companies, they are going to have to pay you with crude oil, and some packed their bag and left. I know Julius Berger stayed and kept on working. So, so what I'm saying is that we have something that we could use to trade some of the big financing that are going to be required for all of this. You're talking about billions and billions of dollars for all of these things that have been listed. So in the case of the southern corridor, with the coastal corridor, is very important. And to tell you why it's very important, from Lagos all the way through Warri, through Port Harcourt, Aba, and then down to Cross River. The reason why it's critically important is not only that it opens a second route, but look at the deep sea ports that we are expecting. We already have Lekki. We are going to have a bomb or a bomb stroke Ibaka. Then
Calabar deep sea port.
Well, Calabar is looking for one, but there is a Bonny deep sea port. Then you have a Badagry deep sea port. You have Bayelsa want their own deep sea port. You know what deep sea port is like? The type of freight that will come there are Panamax. They carry 16,000 containers. Not the 4,000 that you see in Lagos Seaport, because they go and land in the high sea, and about 4 or 5 ships will come and transship and bring in for 4,000. So if you imagine one offloading 16,000 multiplied by, how are you going to evacuate them from the seaports? So that's why you need that kind of rail to be able to push the products out quickly and not cause 100 miles of congestion.
Okay, so let's go to Russia. And the question I will give to the ambassador, if it's on now, would be, are there likely to be conflict of interest in Nigeria-China relations with the Russia's comeback in Africa?
Thanks for the question. But first, let me address one of the questions that you asked regarding the G2G approach. G2G guarantees, to a large extent, that the projects that both countries have agreed on will be implemented. Now, does that exclude the private sector? Absolutely not. Government cannot go and start digging ditches. Government cannot go and start doing anything without involving the private sector. So it's up to the Russians to nominate their own private entities that will participate in this project, and Nigeria to also nominate competent companies that will also participate in these projects. So the G2G simply guarantees funding, guarantees oversight, guarantees seriousness of the government to ensure that these projects are executed from start to commissioning. So I don't think there is any issue with private sector involvement in these projects at all. Conflict between China and Russia. Nigeria is too big for one to be concerned about China's involvement in Nigeria, or Russia's involvement in Nigeria, or the United States' involvement in Nigeria, or Japan's involvement in Nigeria. All of us, including Nigeria, we have our interests. I'm sure that China has a strategic interest in Africa, and specifically Nigeria. Russia is coming in with its own strategic interest to protect. I don't think they want to hand us down anything. Nigeria has its own or her own strategic interest to protect. So we will engage whichever country, whichever entity that we can derive some value for our own people, some benefits for our own people, and the critical areas that the president agreed with President Putin Those are areas that we believe will benefit our people tremendously. So whether China, as it has dominated the Nigerian landscape in terms of projects, is there or not, there is enough room for Russia to also play a very critical role. You were talking about the Coastal Railroad. There are other lines also that the Chinese are not involved in, that nobody for now is also involved in. The Coastal Railroad is just one line. The Chinese are doing another line. There are 3, 4 or so other lines that are still being mapped out, still waiting for people to express an interest, or companies to express an interest in developing for us. There is so much to do in Nigeria. Our infrastructure deficit is so huge. If we're able to solve our infrastructure problem, Nigeria perhaps will be sitting on the same table with G5. No time. Given the industriousness of the Nigerian, given how creative and innovative we are. So I'm not scared. There is no conflict of interest. There is no clash. There is nothing of that nature. If there were going to be a clash, you would be talking about a military technical cooperation agreement with Russia as being a threat to either the United States or a threat to the West. But we are a sovereign state, and we have the right to protect our interest to the fullest extent of the law without violating the basic tenets of international law. As long as we remain within that framework, I don't think that we have anything to be afraid of. We're strong enough to hold our own. We're strong enough to partner with whomever we wish to partner. And the international community has to respect that.
Okay, a couple of tweets are still coming now. Let's take this one from Senna Murray. There is a lot of reason for optimism with the outcome of our participation in the Sochi summit. Russia initiated it because it's committed to driving it. It's of strategic advantage to President Putin's new vision of resurgent and confident Russia. We have taken that. We'll take other tweets, but the focus once again is fallout of Russia-Africa Summit gains for Nigeria. And you can join the conversation by going to our Twitter handle at Tuesday Live NTA. Just after this time out, don't go away.
When you think about hospitality and affordable luxury away from home, then you talk about Sharon Ultimate Hotels, a secured and serene environment that offers kingly services such as 24-hour room service, impeccable security with CCTV surveillance, parking lots, free Wi-Fi internet service, free complimentary breakfast, restaurants that offers continental and local dishes, well-equipped fitness center with instructors, swimming pool, 350 capacity multi-purpose hall, laundry service, pastry corner, mini mart, and our suites are breathtaking. For reservation, locate us at plot 1710 Tafawa Balewa Way, Area 3, Garikia, Abuja. Sharon Ultimate Hotels, the ultimate place.
Nigerians. Our fearless officers and men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. Now, Federal Minister of Information and Culture bring on this message.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying tuned. And the focus, fallout of Russia-Africa summit gains for Nigeria. Well, before we went on break, a couple of tweets came in, and we'll take them now and sustain the conversation tonight. Before I go to the very ones down, Makentami says Nigeria has so much to gain if they took the advantages with the Russians. And Coyote Climate says, I think the government should focus more on the installation of the solar system mini-grid designs specifically and increase the local content capacity on it rather than at nuclear energy at the moment. That's from Coyote Climate. And this one by MC Chimeziri. It says, I think the first one, let me allow Professor Kenife take that. When I go to, let's listen to Professor Kenife on that.
The solar...
The one by Coyote Climate.
Yeah, see, I'm an ardent supporter of taking power to the mass market. Because all the shenanigans we are having with power, the story is too long. You can have solar in your house in Abuja, have in your town in Kaduna, and have in your village, but you can only sleep in one place. So if solar can get into the grid and somebody pays for it, somebody gets power. So I support the idea of using solar, expanding solar, but solar cannot sustain industries. Industries that have three-phase power requirement that draw huge, you won't be able to use mini grids for those purposes. So we still have to have an energy mix. So why this works very well for rural electrification for cities and all that stuff and small industrial applications, you need that balance. And the thing is that look at how many power stations we have in the country and look at the grid system and the instability of the grid system. When you have one nuclear power station, it could give you 10,000 megawatts. It could give you 20,000 megawatts. And then it gets into the grid and is distributed. So I said, yes, there are two sides of the same coin.
Okay, now there's this other one by MC Chimeziri. It says the MOUs with Russia is exciting, considering our pressing national needs right now. But what is the guarantee that these MOUs will be respected implemented when this president leaves office? That's continuity now.
That's the question.
That's his concern.
That's the question. No, he's asked the right question. What is the guarantee? Again, the guarantee, I think, is what we've been saying. I'm not an expert in this, steel business, but I believe I can confidently say that it will probably take a couple of years to revive the Ajakuta steel complex, for example, and the other plant. So the best that this regime can do is to lay the foundation. Let work start. And hopefully a new regime would, complete it. Part of the whole problem is that there's been no elite consensus on a number of things in this country. It's worse in the States, by the way. So one regime comes, begins something, another one comes, abandons it, and starts, something else. There was a time, maybe Prof, you know this better than I do. There was a time I think there was something done about abandoned uncompleted building in universities. One university alone had 28 uncompleted projects. 21 university. So the best, let's not do that. If you come into power and there's an ongoing project and it's economically worth it, viable and necessary, do the best you can to complete it. So the best this regime can do for this nation is they sign these agreements, let them get them going, and we hope that the next administration would also continue and complete the projects. Okay. Once that is done, everybody who gains.
Okay. Adoku, Edikan Odoko says, I think this is a welcome development to the betterment of the economy of Nigeria. The president is taking a bold step by creating economic ties with Russia. But let's not forget the fact that neocolonialism is ongoing. We should be careful how we treat. God bless Nigeria.
Yeah, I had said just a while ago that we should do what I call cautious optimism. While we are talking of Nigeria now, goes ahead for implementation and sustained management of these projects and programs, especially as they affect the agreements Nigeria has so far signed, not only with the Russian Federation, but with other countries like China, South Africa, Germany, and some other countries that have recently entered into bilateral agreements with the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So it is like ensuring that all these things are not just done for doing sake, that there is a follow-up. Like Ambassador Professor Steve Uba said recently, just a while ago, that it takes the home front also to key into the arrangement. It's not just enough for government is supposed to take the lead. Then we, as citizens, will follow. Private sector, of course, being actively involved. And then there's no fear that we are going to lose out in any way, because Nigeria, perhaps more than any other time in the past, is ready, poised now to impose its economic heft to guarantee sustainability, implementability, and then, ensuring that all these are not just wasted efforts. We can see that we are not just concentrating with Russia now. The government is also veering into the Middle East. President Buhari is currently, I just left this evening for Saudi Arabia, and another economic summit. So when these things are brought together, it led for the focal MDS to now swing into action and ensure that all these projects and agreements are properly implemented to the benefit of the common good.
Okay, I'll take the next tweet to Russia. If Ambassador Uba is there, it says the visit is part of the wake up to deepen economic relations with countries of high economic comparative advantage in science, technology, and industrialization. These areas were covered, but I hope the cooperation in the educational sector is also given priority. What's your take on that?
Thanks for the question and thanks for the tweet, whoever sent it. Education was one of those issues that was also addressed during the summit, the bilateral between President Buhari and President Putin. It will interest people to know that Russia ranks very, very high, if not at the very top, of providing our students scholarships to study in Russian institutions. So we take education very seriously. In fact, I just welcomed about 100 Nigerian scholars in Russia. Okay. The benevolence, the Russian government, they were on Russian scholarship through the bilateral education assistance program. And they intend to continue. And we've asked Russia to increase the number of slots for Nigeria, given Nigeria's demand for higher education. Russia is educating our students in the highest of sciences you can think of. Technology, of course, as well as in the humanities. So there is a lot of movement right now from the Russians to assist or to provide those slots to Nigerians to study in Russia. And in one of the meetings that we held just before the summit, the Russians also had indicated that one of the thorny issues for African students in Russia was the ability for them to gain either employment or practical training in Russia. It was totally lacking. But they are willing to now open up the space for Nigerians, for African students to actually work in Russia. They are working out those modalities. So I believe Russia is really serious about engaging us on all fronts, including education. That is the good news that I wanted to be sure got out there. The Russians are sensitive to our requests. They are sensitive to the hamstring that our students are put to in terms of work. And that's why some students, don't particularly want to go to Russia because of their inability to work. But that space is going to be opened up, and we're very happy about that. So there are lots of things going on in the education sector that are benefiting Nigeria and will continue to benefit Nigeria. But let me go back to the issue of continuity of projects. Some of these projects obviously cannot be started and finished overnight. And as we said, some of these projects have been around for over 4 decades, some 2 decades. Some are on the drawing board. Why? The lack of will, political will, greed, insensitivity are perhaps the things that are driving these projects to the ground. If for once we stop thinking about ourselves and we start thinking about this country, about our country, Nigeria, I think that we'll be doing our country a favor, we'll be doing generations that will come after us a favor. So I don't have to support Ajaokuta because I'm from Kogi. I'm a Nigerian. I know the strategic importance of steel. I don't have to support a nuclear power plant because it's going to be in Akwa Ibom. Because I'm from Akwa Ibom. No. I support the nuclear power plant, or any plant for that matter, anywhere where we can get advantage that will benefit Nigerians, regardless of where I come from. I think that's the mindset that Ambassador Kishi was talking about. We need to change that mindset. We need to think more about the country so that programs that we start, projects that we start, regardless of which government comes in, we don't ditch them because the previous government started it and we want to start something so as to discredit the old government. No. If it's something that is in the national interest, we all should embrace it. So I shouldn't come in and kill Ajaokuta simply because it is not in my village. I shouldn't come and bomb a railway line because it is not passing through the village. When strategically that railway line or that road network, maybe by extension, maybe through trickle down, it also benefits me. Not directly, it will be indirectly. But we have to change our mindset. We have to restructure our minds to think about this country first and not for our own selfish ends. Then continuity will be, we'll realize. Otherwise, all these things that we're talking about, the amount of work that we're putting in, trying to get these agreements ratified, and work actually started, will come to a grinding halt once President Buhari leaves office. And we hope that doesn't happen. We hope that doesn't happen because that's not what we're fighting for. We're fighting for Nigeria and not for just 4 years. Okay. My own mandate is to ensure that programs are implemented during this government's administration. Our projects succeed. Our projects come online or on stream during the administration. But I know that some of the life of some of these projects will extend beyond the administration, and other people coming in should be able to pick it and run with it and not kill it for political reasons or for selfish reasons. So we have to restructure our own mindset in Nigeria.
Okay, that's a very elaborate one there. And our first caller tonight is calling in from Jos. Hello, Abdul Kadri. You're on to Tuesday Live. We lost the call. Now, quickly, before we sustain the other lines of thought, let's take this one from Mekantimani. I believe if Nigeria is able to secure the Russian investors into investing in a Ajaokuta Steel Company, the greater number of unemployed youths will be out of the streets. I love the latest relationship between both countries, quite beneficial. Let me leave it open.
Yeah. It's a straightforward statement.
Okay.
It's a straightforward statement. Yes.
All right. Zakira Karaka says Russia has a comparative advantage in terms of military support to Nigeria, considering their success in Syria and their partnership with Iran. But I still believe we should look inwards and develop internally. The other one says, great move by the federal government, but my opinion, more emphasis should be on rail and power because they are the mother of industrialization. So you can react to that.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. But I think let me address the three together.
Okay.
Because this whole issue about financing this whole package could cause nightmare. But I think one advice I would give to federal government is to try with Russia this whole concept of a new investor. We need a different kind of investor now. Let's see if we can try that experiment with Russia. What we call end-to-end investor. If you look at the refinery, somebody built the refinery. It's not the person who built it that is running it. Then you have ministers upon ministers will come and give contracts. People will buy. There was a time we had $200 million worth of spare parts that couldn't fit. Because people are just buying spare parts. Then when you do turn around maintenance, God knows who you bring in to do their maintenance. So you have that disjointed and it's all included sack. Now let's take another one. We have somebody is getting gas, somebody is gathering gas, somebody is supplying gas to the Genco. Genco is producing power, is giving it to NBET, and then NBET gives the power to Disco. Now Disco pays only 24% of the gas that, the power that they received is what they pay, and then the 24% is not enough for the Genco to pay salary, pay the loan, pay the. You see all these misalignments. There's so much misalignments in our power configuration. Not least the fact that 50% of power is lost in transmission anyway. But when you have an end-to-end investor, what you deal with everything in one package. You give him a gas field, he will generate the gas, he will gather the gas, he will pipe the gas to his power generation unit, he generates the power, And according to the current law, you can transmit and you can use franchising, you can distribute. So it collects his money at the end. It starts from its end to end. You go to another field, you produce LNG, LPG goes to the home, you can recoup your money. There's nobody in between you, is end to end. You come to the mining, you mine the metal, you process the metal, you refine the metal, and then you have cash at the end of it, and then you don't want. So the borrowing issue is addressed because you can get your money at the end and not have 10 people on the queue, and then you have misalignments, inefficiencies, and everything, confusion. Then you're going to get Russia to build it and give you in Russian language, and then the Chinese will come and carry the next segment in Chinese language, and then come on, what are we doing?
Very risky.
And the same thing with crude oil. You take the crude field, produce the oil, refine the oil, and bring the petrol. You can take your money or give it to these tank farms in Lagos, and they can export them, or you have your own chain and get them in all your own petrol stations. Or NNPC power stations can have the work. So it's end to end, and we're not going to worry about how we're going to pay you, because you can see where your money is going to come from at the end of the line. And at least we can have 1 or 2 systems working in this country. The whole thing is misalignment.
Okay, the next one says we need continuity. Is really not about starting a new project now than leaving it when a new government comes in. Incoming governments not neglect this new project for another. I think you addressed that. And from Russia, Ambassador Obat took that. This very one here says, first, may God bless the ambassador. We must understand, I don't know which one he's talking about, whether Keshi, Abu, or Oba. We must understand that projects are for national growth, not ethnicity rivalry. I welcome this new move, but sir, how can there be mind shift to sustain this development? How can there be mind shifts?
Well, mind shift comes from the leadership. It's part of the responsibility of leadership, and it is the way the leadership, decides that where he wants to take the country to and how he wants to do that. And the way he decides to do it, that's when people begin to change their mindset, they begin to change their attitude to their country and so on. And there are quite a number of examples all over the world that we can borrow. So it's simply a question of leadership. Changing the mindset is simply a question of leadership. I've heard people say that it's a question of followership. No, it's more a question of leadership. Okay. If the leadership decides that yes is yes, that's how it's going to be. Nigerians will come to respect, they know exactly what to expect. If it says it's the rule of law and there's no compromise, not one person is above the law. Wherever it's involved, we have to face the law. And it shows it in truth and in spirit, in action, in everything. That's the way it's going to be. And I think sometimes I say to our leaders, try and read the success stories of other leaders. And you see how, like a society like ours, how leaders took such rural societies, modernized them, and changed the people completely. Not too long ago, I think 2 years ago, we were I went with a team to Singapore, and we met the Deputy Prime Minister. And the leader of the team wanted to know how they deal with the issue of corruption in the civil service. And the question he posed to the Deputy Prime Minister was, do you have issues of corruption? The Deputy President said, Deputy Prime Minister said, not really. Occasionally we have one person falling by the wayside. And he said, how do you deal with that? And he said, we deal with it in such a way that nobody repeats the same thing. Can that be said of any leader in this country? Absolutely no. He said, we deal with that person in such a way that no civil servant repeats the same thing. This is in Singapore. So how did the leaders create that system? It's a question of leadership. And I would recommend for our leaders in this country who have not read the book from Third World to First World, that they should read it and see exactly what these guys do, or the leadership in Malaysia, even Indonesia. A number of these countries, leadership made a difference. So if our leaders decide, and this is a change administration, if they really decide that, look, this is what we want to do, and that there are certain things that no compromise, a lot will change. And there's so many things that need to be changed in this country, both the big ones and the small ones. Even when you drive on our street, I'm taking the small one, when you drive on our, particularly in Abuja street today, you see how reckless, we've become in driving. No respect, no decorum, no
order.
No order. Nobody pays attention. In fact, it looks as if when they see the amber, they increase their speed. So this is the time to go. And it's a mindset. Why? Because there's no law and order. But there are institutions in this country that were created to ensure that these things, happen. So when our leaders insist, let me put it simply as best as I can, when our leaders insist on doing the right thing, there'll be a mindset. It's as simple as that.
Okay, Aduku, government is willing, the stage is set, and you now come implementing agencies in terms of commitment, corruption, capacity. Are we ready?
Well, the present administration has already set the ball rolling. President Buhari's war against corruption, bringing corrupt individuals, public servants, and even sometimes in the private sector to book, shows that we are getting it right. It is an understatement to say that any country can exist totally without one or two corrupt persons. It has been endemic in the country over the years. We all know about it. But the right way to go is the parameters already set by government. Like His Excellency, the Ambassador said, if only there is this commitment, this willpower to ensure that government rules, every government has laid down rules and regulations to govern the public. But then how well do we pursue and ensure that those policies and programs of government are implemented faithfully and to the letters? So it takes time. It's not something that can be done overnight. They say old habits die very hard, and then I wouldn't expect anybody to wake up tomorrow and say the entire country has been totally cleansed of corruption. It takes time, takes commitment on the side of the government, and also what I would call a psychological reorientation on the side of the people. Because when I think it was President Buhari that introduced the war against indiscipline some time ago, assisted by late Tunde Idiagbo, it took some time for people to realize that you have to queue up to be able to get what you want. It's not just enough to say that because you are stronger and you look more physically fit, you push the weaker person aside and go and get your turn in the bank or on the streets or at the bus stations. So the government sets the role, the parameters. People were certainly keen, as we are beginning to see now in the country. People are crying that things are hard here and there. Yes, why wouldn't things be hard when people are no longer getting money freely and easily as they were doing before? I know of people who had, had to even sell off their properties to be able to sustain themselves because they had 200-300 houses all over the place. But now, even if they want to sell, the money is not there to buy. So it will discourage others who want to, key into such dubious agenda and attitude and practices to deprive others of what generally should go around. That also brings me to the issue of inequality. You know, the inequality gap is expanding more and more and more and more. Less and lesser number of people are benefiting. And that is also what creates all these difficulties we are seeing, and so on and so forth. Everybody, they say the idle hand is the devil's workshop. Somebody stays for a long time and is not getting what he says. There are times when you see some people, especially those in higher positions in government, pass by. You see somebody crying, this car you are driving is money that would have gone around us, it was stolen money and so on. Maybe it is just a government vehicle that somebody is driving to go and do his work. Some of us who have worked closely with the villa sometime had noticed that people are just misplacing their aggression on you because they think that what you have is what they should have been evenly and equitably distributed to every other person, which in most cases is not correct. So by the time we are guided properly on what to do, everybody will key in, because nobody wants to go to jail. Nobody wants to lose his freedom by doing the wrong thing. All we need is to be guided. Like His Excellency said, everywhere is a motor park in Abuja now, even at the roundabouts and all the busy areas and so on and so forth. Nobody obeys the law. There was a time here when it was not allowed for even these little tricycles and whatever they call them to be parked here and there. But you can see everywhere. Now in the middle of the road, you horn and horn and horn, and he will not give you way. But if one or two of them had been arrested and charged, you find that the others will fall in line and obey traffic laws and rules and regulations. So that is my take on that. It takes a good leadership.
Capacity.
Yeah, okay, the capacity, yes. I have always also said that capacity building is very, very important. For we even to key into this new digital economy we're talking about, people have to be trained. Capacity building is very, very important. And how do we do that? By encouraging people to go to school. Professor Steve Uba just said how Russia has increased the number of scholarships they award to Nigerians. When I was there, it was between 65 and 70. I'm happy now to hear that they are giving us more than 100 slots or thereabout. And so many other countries are doing the same. Nigerians, when I was in Ukraine, I found that so many Nigerians who want to sell the last thing they have to go and have their children educated and treated there, and trained there, especially in the field of medicine. And people were spending a lot of money and they were making this. So Nigerians are stopping at nothing to make sure that their children, their wards are properly educated. And that's the only way we can build capacity. Otherwise, when our partners come from overseas to help us, we'll still be lagging behind. It takes two of equal talents to be able to make progress and achieve desired results.
Yes.
That's my take.
Professor Kenife, the real sector, and to be specific, Lagos Calabar was mentioned, and everybody's so happy about that. But if some sustained plan is not in place, is it possible there could be some conflict between the Russian plan with Nigeria and the Chinese plan with Nigeria, given so much investment already put in place by China?
Yeah, the jury is out on that. One thing I would say is we cannot overemphasize. I mean, the last time we actually had investment in rail, other than now, was in 1927. The last time we had investment put in was 1927. And in economic terms, rail transport is the most efficient, most effective, and the cheapest form of transporting heavy goods over long distances. And transport inefficiency costs us 30% of the input cost to production, while power is about 40%. So even the collateral damages to roads are just because we don't have rail. So you can't overemphasize the need for this to have that infrastructure. And I've already told you what would come if we have all these deep sea ports on paper. It will be chaos in every state in the coastal region. But that rail will aid immediate evacuation. And then, of course, I did a study early this year, I think, on the eastern coast, the eastern gateway. We have western corridor, eastern corridor, and coastal corridor. I did a study on the eastern corridor from Port Harcourt to Maiduguri, and I came up with a calculation that by 2035, which is 15 years' time, we could build a $1 trillion economy in that coastal corridor, in that eastern railway corridor. Looking at the 18 states it will pass through and looking at some industrial parks and all the backward and forward transportation. I didn't do the study for the coastal because the coastal would actually be a much bigger economy when you look at all the roads that are going to be bringing things and the movement of goods forward and backwards. So what am I saying? It's critical that we have that. Am I in a position to judge what will be the fallout between two contenders, China and China? I don't know. Who is going to fund it? The end is the money. I don't know the money, the financial detail with China yet. Not with China, with Russia. If Russia says we're going to fund it 100% and we're going to manage it for 20 years and get back our money, it will be music to the ear of our policymakers. But if you ask us to fund it, then you have to join the queue. If you ask us to bring only 15% down payment, then we'll see how it goes. But if you tell us that you can give us oil and you can use it to trade trade by barter, again, that would be music because we want people to buy our oil.
So let's go to Russia, and going to Russia, I'll be taking the concluding thoughts of Ambassador Davis Ugba. And what are your concluding thoughts regarding the issue we have just sustained conversation on?
Thanks. I think I'm very happy. I'm very excited about the discussions that I've heard so far because while I am an incurable optimist, I'm also realistic enough to know that there will be challenges to any of these proposals that we have on the table. But to bring them out in the open and discuss them is something positive. There is no need to sweep anything under the rug. As long as they're open and we're discussing them openly, we together can find solutions to our problems. We are capable in Nigeria of finding those solutions to our problems. And as the panelists, my distinguished colleagues have outlined what the various benefits and the challenges are, I think it's something nice a nice conversation to hold. But I am very, very optimistic that the Russians are now ready to engage us, and I'm hoping that we at home are also ready to engage the Russians. We are working here very hard in Moscow, but not just in Moscow. We're also working very hard in Minsk, in Belarus, to bring partners together, help us solve our problems. I know that in solving the problems, both of us are mutually going to benefit from the solution. Russia, Nigeria, Belarus, Nigeria, all of us stand to gain. So it's not a grant, it's not a giveaway, it's not aid. This is a partnership that will allow us to build things together. So I'm very happy about the discussion. I'm very happy about the tone. I'm very happy about the perspectives of each of the panelists towards this Russia-Africa summit, which I think is historic. And we should build on that momentum moving forward. I'm very, very pleased.
Ambassador Steve Davis Ugba, Nigeria's Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to the Russian Federation with concurrent accreditation to the Republic of Belarus. It was nice having you on Tuesday Live. Thanks for being there, and we enjoyed your line of thought.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And back in Abuja, Ambassador Kechi, what's your concluding thoughts?
First,
the fears, the concerns, the benefits.
First, let me dissuade people who have been looking at this, what the Chinese would think. In another discussion, there was a question raised that we need to be concerned about the Americans. Let me say tonight that we don't have to bother ourselves about the Americans or the Chinese, for one simple reason that the Russian resurgence and interest in this continent, and indeed in this country, they have to do a lot of catch-up the Chinese or with the Americans. And I don't think the Chinese are having a sleepless night over this or the Americans. But even if they are, that's not our concern. Our concern is what is in our best interest.
Sure.
That is what we should focus on. The second thing is that we are all optimistic that these agreements have been signed. Indeed, most of them actually are renewed because some of the things have been ongoing discussion. It is now time to move to implement them. The railway that we've been discussing, has been on the drawing board, or has been on the books for a couple of years. We have a 25 years rail master plan in this country. I don't think many people remember that. It was in the early years of President Obasanjo, and this East-West Coastal Line has been on the drawing board for, we've sold the idea to the Chinese, it's still there. In fact, I knew that the last regime was actually going to go in June to get the money to start that now. If again we can prioritize and decide that in all this, which ones can we begin to do in order for people to see that something is happening out of this agreement? That's when this whole optimism will actually, bear fruit. So we need to begin to prioritize and decide where do we get a quick win on both sides. For me, I think that Jakarta thing is the clearest. Because many years ago and up to recently, it was said that it was 90% completed. But then I think we should stop saying 90% completed, because 90% completed, we are looking at the old technologies. But I'll go back to what I said earlier on. Can we get the Russians to come and inspect the plant and tell us where it is today? Can we ask the Russians, listen, can you guys take this plant, redo it, manage it for 10, 15 years, and let's see whether we now have a plant that will spur industrialization in this country.
Okay. Mr. Oduku.
Yes. My take on it conclusively would be that Nigeria currently has what we call the youth bulge, and that is to say a large percentage of our population is on the youth side, and most of them are either unemployed or underemployed or just roaming the streets for nothing. So when these projects, especially the Ajokuta Iron and Steel, are brought to practical implementation, we find that it will generate a lot of employment for the young people. That is number one. Number two, the fear of conflict of interests in all these agreements should not arise, because our national interest has always been number one consideration when all these agreements are being even conceptualized, the drafts made, and then eventually we're thinking of implementation. So every country that comes to partnership with Nigeria will be working towards what it will benefit. We on our side as Nigerians will be focusing on how much will be to the best of our advantage comparatively to the benefit of our country. So that also gives us an added advantage if these projects are put in a place. Now it's no longer even a question of if, it's now going to be when, because most of the agreements have already been signed. And then I also try to look at this issue of nuclear energy, the fear. A lot of scholars have expressed that it is better to have street lights and focus on that and make sure it is workable than going into a larger and more bogus program or project like the nuclear energy. Our nuclear energy drive is for peaceful purposes. It's not to go and generate wars and conflicts with any other part of the globe, but to be sure that at least gives us the required energy consumption we need. So many countries of the world talk of hundreds of thousands of megawatts. We're still operating under 5,000 megawatts, a population of over 180 million people. It's grossly inadequate to serve the population. So those areas, apart from generating employment for a large number of Nigerians with relevant skills and qualification. It also helps to make life better for the people. A lot of industries would have been operating optimally if the power supply was enough. You cannot even operate a simple small hotel by the roadside if you do not have a standby generator. And the cost of buying diesel and the pollution and the noise and so on would have been avoided if we can enter into a very strong and sustained nuclear project that can, boost that area of our economy and make people a little more comfortable than before. And then finally, I would also want to say that the cooperation we're having with the Russians, especially in the field of fertilizer production, is very, very important. Russia today is known to be the number one, they have the highest natural reserve of potassium all over the world, which is, of course, an essential ingredient for the production of fertilizer, which will also help us in the agricultural sector. So you can see that from all the areas we have considered this evening, Nigeria stands to gain a lot if they are all...
And it shall be a win-win, not win-lose.
Win-win this time around. That is what we are conversing for.
Yeah, I think I'm very optimistic. I'm always an optimist when it comes to economic development. Why I'm very optimistic is Nigeria is a beautiful bride right now, and we should exploit the opportunities. In relation to China, what I suggested and keep suggesting is China is under pressure from America. The trade is threatened. Now, if we say to China, bring $100 billion investment here, transfer some of those your industries instead of closing them down, and produce the same thing and send it through here to America, exploiting our AGOA, you save yourself 25% tax. It makes sense to China. Say it now, they will come. But that will not fly with Russia. I will say to Russia, since there is so much strategic alignment between your resources and factor endowments to that of Nigeria, then let's do deal. But we want end-to-end investment. Then you're going to get them jumping on your back because they want to get into this field right now. They are latecomers. They want to go in. And Nigeria is credit-worthy because we have the resources. We have the natural resources. We have the mineral resources. So we can say, and we have the market, the biggest market in Africa. And to be honest with you, our potential in Africa is yet to be exploited. Even if we are made the central bank of ECOWAS next year, before the end of that year, you hold the whole of Central Africa joining, and then the rest will be by accession. Nigeria could now become the central bank of Africa. So don't underestimate the potential of our country. So we say to them, yeah, let's go. If we have to go and find $30 billion, if you cost this program now, and it comes to $30–40 billion, we're going to look for 13 trillion naira. And I don't know how that's going to square with our debt sustainability issue. We're going to begin to approach the 40% threshold. Servicing is already a problem. How are you going to service all that? So then just don't go there. Tell them to invest. End-to-end investor. They will see their money for at the end of the tunnel. It's easy. And they will come and we'll sit back and smile. That's what I think.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I could still see Ambassador Steve Davis seated there. Let me thank you once again for being part of the program tonight. Thank you so much. And Ambassador Jokeshi, it was nice having you.
Thank you as always. Thank you.
And Ambassador Clement Onoja Adokun, thanks for being on the program.
Thank you so much.
And last but not the least, Ken Ife.
Thank you.
You dangle a carrot. Thank you so much. Thank you so much at those who visited our Twitter handle and contributed. It was not being on the program. On behalf of all of us, thanks for watching.